It was woven in two halves and sewn together. And the piece I made is made from lots of different plants. Normally, I just tend to use one plant. Um, but I made, was about 60, 70 very thin ropes of all over 3 meters long as the warp, and then lots of different weft horizontal ones. Um, but I like, well, I'm trained as an architect and I like the kind of balance with structure. And so this lots of kind of lightness of touch, or understanding the minimal amount of structure that you need to create something. It's not a practical piece, but it's kind of celebrating the plants that are all around us, well, all around me in the Highlands close to me. So I normally try, so I learned, well, I better not chat too long.
That's okay. No, you're totally fine. I mean,
Um,
that's it. It's really difficult to give a brief summary.
yeah,
And there's
well,
so many
I've got a few sort of samples beside me. So the first thing I learned was heather rope. Um, And that's, so rope is made all around the world, all different methods depending on the plants that you've got. But here, heather is one of the plants, and heather rope was really strong and used a lot. But it's a particularly tough material. You can't roll it or roll it on your leg, and so it's made by hand, by kind of twisting. Um, so I learnt that method, and then I've used it for rush and other plants all around here, and ended up making really, really thin, fine ropes, which, so, just with almost sometimes, not with heather, but with grasses and things, the same material, you could make a very thick rope or a very thin rope. Um, so yeah, there's, anyway, but one of the things is the kind of whole process and slow transformation, and you could almost say alchemy of transforming a material that you've gathered. I've got samples on the floor which I can show, into a thin bit of rope, and then weave that into something, and then make it into a textile thing that's got the quality of textiles.
And then the
Um,
structure of that's really strong as well. So you're transforming it to be something more
it's
than it would be
It's
like.
got a totally different, exactly. You've picked a very fragile, even it's a rush stem, and then you make a bit of rope, and suddenly it's much stronger. Yeah, yeah.
And so those processes, like I think I maybe picked up somewhere that they're like really kind of like historical processes that you
Well, yes, the
learned
heather rope
that go
making.
back.
Yeah, the heather rope making and that kind of traditional handmake was used until relatively recently, I think. I've been trying to slowly, over about last 40 years or so, just gather little snippets of, sometimes you just get something from somebody, or a bit of a word for something, and sometimes the Gallic word then informs some other, so it's sort of like just getting little snippets of knowledge and putting them together. um yeah, so like my neighbor, for example, I think it was, told me about, they used to make nails out of heather, and that were holding the slates on in an old house over somewhere, so there's just little bits and pieces. So some of the things, so the techniques are looping, twining, and then weaving, and coiling, I suppose. Yeah. And some are things that you think might have been used, but that's been lost. But then you might find echoes in Ireland, or very similar habitats. Yeah, I
It's a
can't.
wealth of knowledge you've been gathering, I guess, as well as
Yeah,
gathering the plants over.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly, exactly. And there's little snippets of it, and you sometimes, yeah, and because I think it's so important, because actually we knew how to work, when to harvest a material, how to work with it. And that knowledge has been kept alive for some plants like willow and hazel. But even then, probably not as much as previously. But other plants, that knowledge is kind of, some of it's drifting away, and it's really important to yeah, to keep it alive, and that, yeah, because it's all haptic knowledge.
I'm slowly scribbling down heritage crafts. I feel like maybe don't know if you connected with them as an organisation. They're based down south, but I'll maybe send that over to you as a link
Yes,
afterwards, just
yeah.
because you
Well,
know don't
I did a residency at Thailand Folk Museum last year, and Isabel Grant collected, there's 40,000 artifacts, and so I was working with some of the plant-based artifacts that were gathered there. So they were actually gathered from around here, but and about in the 1930s. And yet now, because I went to some of the same places to try and see, and people just don't have any recollection of, things being made like that. There was a heather mat, for example, and then there were certain types of brushes. Yeah, so that knowledge can be lost quite quickly.
Great. Well, thank you for sort of grounding us in your practice and the materials that you use. But I'll just move over to Jo to kind of tell us a bit about her practice. But it strikes me already that there's similarities in terms of like weaving, but also like obviously the materials are very different, but the knowledge that's retained, because I guess the idea is that there's a lot of knowledge in books as well. But anyway, I will let Jo explain her background and her practice, and then we can look at other kind of similarities or differences as well, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously I was tapestry trained, so I learned the basics of weaving and making structures, and I was interested in the fact that you could make a surface that could then be used for something else. I wasn't really overly interested in wools and cottons and things, but I was really interested in using paper because there's so much paper around us, and there's so many books around us that are that either sit there or they get sent for recycling or they get thrown out. So some of my work uses text, depending on the size of it, actually. So huge pieces of work. One of the biggest pieces of work I made used 900 books. So
Wow.
clearly the text in that is not overly important. It's more about the colours of the pages and the text, the size of the type, and what it looks like once it's cut up. Smaller pieces of work, some of my more personal work has used text that's important to me, or sort of music sheets and things. So the smaller the piece of work, the more you can be particular about what you use. But if you're going to make something really big, then clearly you have to use whatever's around you. A lot now, after a couple of decades, the books that I have now got that I can use all have some kind of history or story to them. So in the early days of when I was still at art college in the 90s, then I used to go and look for books and buy them. But now everybody gives me whatever books they're throwing away. So I have a huge stock of things, and I pretty much pick my paper according to the colours. So it's like a paint palette. So there'll be dark books up to mid-tones, up to lighter tones, up to white tones. So that's where it's not particularly the text, it might just be the colour. And then you combine them to make sort of mid-tones to make bigger things as well. And I use traditional weaving techniques in that I warp up, but I might warp up with cotton, or I might warp up with fishing line, or I might warp up with wire. And then I pretty much weave like a normal weave, like over under, to make a structure. And then once it comes off the loom, I'll then do something with it that makes it a bit more sculptural. So small scale up to big scale, and text important, sometimes just the colours.
And in the exhibition, you have a mixture of different scales in the pieces that you're exhibiting as well, don't you? You have some of the kind of larger woven structures.
So the three smaller pieces that are, if anybody's seen the exhibition, the three smaller pieces that are in Perspex boxes. So they are pretty significant. They're small. They were my family's collection of books and music pages and tartan. So they sort of mean something text-wise. The piece that's on the floor was made over COVID times. So that was quite significant. It was sort of two trails of, I call them paper stories because it's lots of books that are cut up and amalgamated together. So obviously you can't read them anymore, but it's like a history of stories that are all together and they've come together. It was called Reconnections. So it was kind of important that everything like connection came or kept it, or it was going to come together at some stage. And the bigger piece, the bigger circle is lots of different books, pretty much the same colour. And it was originally a small prototype of a really small circle that I made. After there was a bereavement in the family, and it was kind of like a wreath on a small scale that I then wanted to make much bigger and hang on a wall that made more of a statement but people didn't necessarily know the personal story behind it, because if you can enjoy it from an aesthetic point of view, you don't necessarily need all of the story as well.
And it's that way of how different people interpret things differently.
Yeah.
You'd have a different
Sometimes I think
meaning.
you need to leave it open, actually. If everything's given away, you can't put your own mark on looking at something.
Yeah.
Mm.
Perfect. I will give a very brief introduction to what my practice is, so it gives context for why I'm interested in asking certain questions. So yeah, basically I'm a jeweler maker. I specialise in finding and cutting different rocks, mainly Scottish, but I'm kind of looking at the idea of kind of future fossils, rocks that are getting diverted to landfill. So there's an element of sort of environmentalism within what I do. But so the start of my practice comes to the point where for me it's a sort of hunter-gatherer, treasure hunting kind of I guess motivation for me to find the rocks. But also for me, life is so busy that it's also to do with sort of well-being. When I go to collect them, there's a sense of sort of relaxation and kind of meditative state when searching and looking. And I wondered for both of you how that plays out in your practice. Is it the collecting or is it the making parts that are kind of, grounding and meditative for you?
I think we talked about that, and it's definitely the making. And I think there's something similar in what Joe and I do, because it's the transformation of the material. And I think there's something really interesting about that. But it's a repetitive task that you sort of have to, it's continually changing, and you can adapt it in so many very subtle ways. But at the same time, you don't have to think too much. So it's a sort of, it's calming in that way. And there's something really important about the feel between your fingers and the smell as well, and the texture. There's lots kind of going on, but you don't really realize all that stuff's going on because your brain is, because sometimes when I start a piece, like starting I didn't actually know how I was going to do it. I'd kind of worked stuff out, but then I thought, right, I've got to make lots of thin ropes, and what precise thickness and which material. So I started that, and then while I'm doing those ropes, I'm thinking about, well, because I had to construct a loom. I've got this kind of bits of wood with a kind very primitive with a dowel at the top, and then I hold it together with straps so it can all come to pieces. But then, so it wasn't very big, and then I had to wrap the thing, so all the technical stuff, which is what I quite like solving as well. But there's that balance between working it out technically, and I'm probably getting lost now. But yeah, Joe, over to you.
So I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I think it's that thing that when you're making something, and I feel like this when I'm teaching as well, that there's so many possibilities, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
you're, I mean, I definitely feel like I'm all over the place when I'm thinking about something. And I mean, it does feel like your head is just going, so there has to be something that grounds that.
Mm.
And I think the grounding of that is just to decide to start on something. And I think, Caroline, you're the same as me. Your actual process it takes a very long time. It's not a quick fix. So I think when you start on something and we were saying it's really important that even though it's kind of units that you make that you repeat, you can't get anybody else involved in that. You have to do it yourself. So it's the
Yeah.
personal feeling of that. And while you're doing that, because you're physically doing something, it sort of physically grounds you that your your head is kind of working out stuff while you're producing, while you're being productive.
Yes, exactly.
So if you had to sit with a piece of paper and a pen and try and work all of that out, you're never going to get anywhere because you don't know what it's going when it's 3D work. You don't know
Yeah.
what it's going to be like until you start making it.
Or what the
And
next problem is.
yeah,
You hit, and then, oh, I hadn't thought
yeah.
about that.
When it's part of a structure, you don't know until you start putting it together. And
No.
sometimes I think that the things that you think are going to take the longest or the most difficult, the answers end up answering themselves basically while you're
Yeah.
doing it. And
Yeah.
then it frees you up for I mean, as long as you're flexible enough to know that what you're doing is not the be all and end all,
Yes.
which it's not going to be, but there's something about a repetitive task which is also quite meditative. But it's like we were talking about this, Steph. It's not meditative in that it's completely calm and it's all chilled out and it's all fine. It's just that it grounds you in some way to try and work through all the rest of the stuff.
Mm.
So it's that idea of like thinking through making and letting it evolve
Yeah,
as
thinking
you
through
do
making.
it.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting in a way of like thinking about design and actually like if you're a designer, you often design an object first, like as you said, like put a pen to a piece of paper and work out what that
Uh-huh.
is. And I think that's what's quite different as a sort of maker is like you're testing things, you're trying things, especially with materials, because you're kind of
Uh-huh.
pushing the boundaries of what that material can do. And it's letting it and being free to let it evolve as you experiment and as you
Well,
say, be open to
There's
it. Yeah.
surprises in material as well, isn't there? You don't
But it,
actually know how it's going to come out until you make it.
but you also we all really understand our materials and what they can do, and then so enjoy kind of getting to that edge of, maybe how thin you can make your jewelry thing to hold the stone, or yeah, different
I
things.
don't know though, even in the early days when I didn't know much about paper and didn't know that newspapers like broadsheets and the shorter ones, like all of that weave of the paper comes out differently. I think the excitement of not actually knowing
Yes.
Yeah. And I think
also informs the finished piece. I know that's different for you, Steph, because I know you need to know that because your material
not
is quite precious.
Not always. I guess with metal kind of behaves in a certain way, but if you use silver or gold, it behaves slightly differently, but usually you can kind of predict the outcome. But I think you just hit the nail on the head with the different types of paper. Like rock is crazy. There's so many different types of rock and each one behaves very differently. So it's like maybe that's what keeps it fresh. It's like
Uh-huh.
exploring something new each time.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it crumbles or it fractures or it breaks, but it's
Yeah.
almost like you're getting to know something.
But it's never wasted though, is it?
No, because it's always like a learning,
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
And I guess it with you, Caroline, when it's different plants, it might kind of,
Exactly. It's about handling. So some of them you have to be quite firm with, and some very, very gentle, and yeah, you can push them so far, but not any further. Yeah.
it's maybe because I think, alchemy is used in the title of the Hags exhibition, and I think that is a nice way to sort of think about it. It's that alchemy of material, and like we are taking materials, and I think Kate, when we were meeting before, Kate Gronier was asking us about how we felt about like the deconstruction of the material. Like, you know, for you, Caroline, I guess the plant isn't so bad, but for Joe and myself, we're sort of breaking down something that's a whole and how we felt about that. But it's, you know, I think the way in my head I think about it's that transformation of something rather than it being like,
Yeah, I
But
think we spoke about that before. Deconstruction feels like a really negative word, and it's only that, like for me, a book that's the life it's been then as a book, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be that. So if you're, like you said, if you're going to transform it into something else, then it's a new life, and it's a process, isn't it? I think
yeah.
that's okay.
And for me, it's you do have to be mindful and about not taking too many plants from one area or that sort of thing. So, and it's also is part of the reason why I use the plants that people used to use because they were really plentiful. Although having said that, some of the plants that used to be plentiful that people used aren't so plentiful now. But yeah, but I mean, I tend to try and use really common plants. Um,
and is that something like for me, like I've always been interested in sort of sustainability within my practice. Like, is that a choice for you? Is that why you've kind of chosen to use those materials, or is it just like a
well, I don't want to
voice of
use
it?
rare, but I mean, I think it's common sense.
Yeah, of course.
And it's also about raising awareness for people to value the ordinary plants that are all around us and notice them more, and so that like it's kind of raising their so they can be respected more and seeing their potential, and also the deep involvement and how not so long ago this plant was valued and now it's not valued.
Caroline, can I ask you, do you do anything to treat them?
No, you
So,
see,
like, what kind of longevity have they
well,
got? Is it just that for as long as they'll last?
well, they could last years and years and years, because
Okay,
we know from archaeological finds, for example, this is so that's an example of a textile made out of the moss, hair moss.
okay,
So that was a shawl. But basically that moss, that was found when they excavated in Edinburgh below it. There was a wind farm being built and there was a Roman road, and underneath the Roman road, because it ran over a bog, was that moss all woven into a mat to support the road. So I thought, crikey, how much moss they'd gathered and woven.
uh-huh.
But also that had just lasted. It hadn't
Gosh,
decayed. And that's it being outside. So as long as you keep things dry and bugs don't,
uh-huh.
then things just last. But
And
then
do you think that because it's in a structure, do you think that makes it more hardy?
possibly, I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Do you think about the I guess the end, because there is the potential that it would decompose as well in the end.
yes, well, I do sometimes put things in the garden to go in the compost heap. So yeah, I quite like that.
Mm-hmm.
Get to say goodbye and then it becomes something else or
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah.
excellent. Great. So yeah, sorry, I'm just picking up my notes because we keep yeah, we've
Yes.
been in and out of lots of different conversations. And yeah, so for me, thinking about sort of how we kind of find, like for me, I found my material out of wanting to sort of be more sustainable and sort of push against, I guess, the jewelry industry. I'm quite interested in how you both sort of made the decision to use plants or paper. What was it that kind of got you deciding that that was the specific material you were going to use, and how has it managed to keep your interest for this amount of time?
Well, it evolved very slowly and kind of naturally, and it's basically the practicality of not having money to buy materials, and then using the materials that are around me, um, and then learning that how they were used in the past, and but a very simple skills you can transform something, and like Joe said earlier, So just with one simple material and one skill, it just is endless, which is why I've tended to keep with one plant. So the piece in the exhibition is kind of a bit kind of, I wasn't sure because there'd be, too many different plants, but I think it's okay. But yeah, so it is. And then each plant, there's always new plants to explore, or a different scale to make your work, or yeah, there's so much to explore within it. Yeah.
I like the idea of it being about being resourceful, having no money, so just looking to see what you can
Yeah.
find around you and make the most of. And I think that probably is a sort of, like a sort of human nature, knowing what you have around you that you can sort of like make the most out of, like thinking of
Yeah.
pre-industrial revolution and how people kind of gathered and made things that were local to them.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
took the time to really understand and learn something,
Well,
so
it was necessity basically, and basically, I think Tess Darwin was in as she wrote in her book how normally of an evening everybody would be making stuff. So you're making rope out of heather, somebody's mending a creel, somebody's doing a net, there's spinning, there's all sorts of things going on because everybody's constantly needing to make, and then you share stories and everything as part of that.
So I guess in the beginning it was like function, I guess, before
Yeah.
it became something that was more sort of, how you're using it today is more of a way of like I guess telling stories and looking at the history of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it not that long ago it was function.
well, yeah, that's it. It wasn't that long ago. So
Yeah.
and who knows, we might revert back to some of these processes if we're like looking at how we can be more sustainable as humans on this earth. Yeah. And what about yourself, Joe?
So I like how I've been using paper for over 2 decades, and I know you should branch out and use different stuff, but I find it so fascinating that there's so many different things you can do with it. And so I came to weaving with paper because I had gone to art college thinking I was going to do graphic design, but I did a general first year and I was in painting and I absolutely hated it. And we were offered to do a block in tapestry, and I didn't know what tapestry was. I hadn't been to the degree show or anything. And we went into the studio. I had fantastic teachers. My teachers were practicing artists as well as tutors. And we had worked up and we were weaving with like wool and stuff like that. And I wasn't interested in that at all. And I looked at home and I had lots of paper, magazines, newspapers. And I thought, I wonder if you can just do that same structure with using paper. And that's what I started doing. And then it's an obsession that's obviously nearly 30 years now. And I just think what you do with the paper, the direction you cut it, the size of the type, the colour of the type, if you treat it, if you leave it, it's almost like doing a really in-depth PhD, I guess, where you've covered every single possible
Yeah.
avenue of it. And that, I mean, for me, that's 29 years now that I've been doing that. And I still don't feel like, because as I said earlier, you've got small scale, you've got big scale, you've got medium scale, you've got, if you're going to make something, if it's a commission for somebody, it's a different thing, it's different colours of paper. I don't tire of it, basically. And I think when you can substitute with different materials and you can make those structures, I just think it's fascinating. And as far as like you were saying, Caroline, about the longevity of stuff, so obviously when it comes to paper, you don't know if it's going to decompose or what's going to happen to it. But I had made some works in 2000, so 25 years ago, and I've stored them. Not particularly well, I have to say. I haven't completely sealed them. They're under the bed, and every so often I bring them out, and nothing's happened to them. I could still hang them on the wall. The only thing that's happened is that the paper has changed colour. So the untreated paper, like old books, has got darker. The white paper of textbooks, which must be coated with something to make them shiny, has not changed. So that in itself is enough of an exploration to do something else with that in the future. So I've sprayed paper if it's, it has to be fire retardant if it's going in a public building. And I mean, it's just interesting because it doesn't dry and it doesn't go brittle, and it's still, as much as it's a really fragile material in that it could decompose or whatever could happen to it. The point of putting it in a tight structure has made it sustainable. And I think that's brilliant.
It's almost just looking back at what you were saying before that, like having like this PhD in paper, this specialist knowledge, and knowing. Do you still feel that there's a lot more to explore? Do you know, like new things, new ways you wouldn't change, like, and change to like say fabric or something?
Well, I've sort of veered off into things like that before. And some of the pieces I've made in fabric. They just don't, it doesn't do it for me.
It's not the same.
It's fabric soft. It takes other skills to make it rigid. You have to do stuff to it. Paper is already rigid. It keeps its, if you weave it, if you knot it, it keeps its edges.
Yeah. And we've got a relationship with paper which goes for a long time. And it is all plant material too, which is interesting. Yeah.
And that's only looking at it as an abstract material as paper. When it comes into the text and all of the other stuff, that's a whole different,
Exactly.
a whole other bag, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you said, you can use some as a sort of conceptual storytelling, or it could just be because of the colours or the textures of that paper. What about yourself, Caroline? Do you think there's still so much more to explore?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the more you focus on something, it just seems to get bigger and there's more potential. And you just, there's so many different things, and it's just even with one material and making thin rope, and larger structures and all sorts of things.
It's about the scale, isn't it? Different scale calls for different, and you know your material. You really know that material.
Yes, and there's something really nice about making really large structures out of very thin, fine grasses or whatever. Yeah, and pushing that edge a bit. Yeah.
Just enjoying seeing you both smile when you're describing these materials. Do you feel like it's like playing, like grown up playing?
Yeah.
Being really experimental
and no. Caroline, you're a yes, I'm a no.
I'm serious, but I think it's serious play. Play to me is being inventive and creative. It's not necessarily jumping around. It depends how you define that. I mean, it's very focused, I think. So yeah.
Okay, Joe, why were you a stern no
I don't know. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's just a need. It's just, it has to be done.
The compulsion more than a playful.
I mean, I kind of well, I don't not enjoy it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, but it's not, it sounds pretentious to say this actually, but it's a need rather than a want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not really pretentious, is it? Do you like, so I guess, for me, if I go for a week without making something, I get a bit
something missing.
I feel like part of me is not quite right, or
I don't know, it feels like my grounding and my connection. If I'm doing it, I feel.
And that's sort of bringing it back to that idea of well-being as well. So, even though, we spoke about well-being as a way of it being meditative, And as you said before, like it is meditative, but you're also thinking through making. But actually, it helps you feel grounded, even if it's not, you know, it's hard work. It's hard work and it's
But
repetitive.
yeah, it is part of what you need to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is, I think it is like part of you and your well-being. I think one of
Yeah.
my friends said like nurturing their practice, you know, is like, you know, having or looking after another child or, you know, like another part of you as well to kind of
You
yeah.
know, when people say to you, what do you think you would do if you weren't an artist? What would be your career? And that makes me feel really panicky because I can't imagine not walking about every day and looking at and noticing everything that's around me. I don't know, there would still need to be some kind of outlet.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do if that wasn't what I was doing.
Great. Yeah, me neither. I think maybe you just sort of intrinsically find yourself sort of drawn to these things, with the needs of your, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're
It's
so
all
Yeah.
very
lucky though. Do you not
intuitive.
think we're so privileged that we get to do that as a career?
Yeah.
I feel lucky. I feel lucky as well.
But yeah, I mean, you've worked really hard to get there and to work out how to be an artist and in kind of, you know, like often probably difficult situations and, you know, it's not easy.
But so it's the constant though, isn't it?
Mm. It's who you are as a person, I think, as a maker. Great. So I wonder if we should maybe open up to some other questions, unless you have anything else you want to kind of ask each other or talk about.
I don't know.
So I'm putting you on the spot there.
Ask
Um,
the questions.
I, I've got some questions in the chat that I can read out, and if anyone else wants to, they could either just put another message in the chat or just find a way of raising their hand, and we'll come to them. But yeah, there's been some few really interesting ones. You started to talk a bit, Joe, about paper, and Steph asked you about the in the quality of paper, whether it sort of deteriorates or other, but there's some questions about about coloured paper and other things you use, and questions about whether paper itself. I think there's a question really is about whether paper itself has changed over the years. I'm not sure. That's from Serena, and then a question from Lindy Land's call that's about the coloured paper and whether you use that. But if you could say a bit to that, that'd be great, Joe.
So normally, because I'm kind of using collections of books, it'll be your sort of standard paper, which is dark for old books, mid-tones for, I guess, kind of fiction, and then creams for more recent fiction. I mean, this is, if there's any literary agents or paper specialists, I'm sure this isn't like a general thing. And then whites for textbooks. So that's where I start from if I'm going to do something that's tonal. I have done a few commissions for people who have given me stuff or asked me to make stuff. So there was I made a commission for a guy in a garage sort of 20 years ago that had auto traders. And he gave me all of them and I cut them and I made a big, I think it was a 5 foot by 5 foot square tapestry with his material. So that had a bit of black and white and a bit of colour in it. And then I've kind of made some stuff from when we still got phone books. There was I made a piece from Yellow Pages. So that was quite nice. But all of that paper is all the same tone of yellow.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was the same kind of colour. And then I made something from a collection of Financial Times. So that had a nice pink tinge to it. And as I said, I made some stuff from my family's collection. So after my dad died, I had lots of his Scottish books, and it was poetry books. So the paper quality in that is kind of different. And it was music sheets. He was a bagpipe player, and there was some tartan sheets. So all of that was kind of mixed together. As Serena, I haven't done a study of how paper's changed over the years. I can only say that I guess that I mean, certainly from when I've been cutting books up recently, because I've been cutting a lot of books up for something, and definitely older and more dispensable books seem to be softer paper and much easier to cut and much easier to thread. And anything that's a bit more, I'm going to say a bit more precious. I'm talking about textbooks here, which are not precious, but they maybe cost more, are coated with something, so they're harder to cut and then they're harder to thread with a needle. So it's quite interesting that, again, like when you're actually weaving, you don't really know what a material is going to be like until you deconstruct it and then try to reconstruct it. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think that's great. It's just really interesting the diversity. Again, it's like, I guess, plants and stone, the diversity of the different types of paper for the different purposes of things as well. You know, and now you'll get like, whereas I get some stuff printed and they use like straw within paper and all sorts. Here, I'll send you their link as well, because it would be like a whole new world of other papers that exist.
No.
You don't need to. I don't need to know.
I'm joking.
But they have weird and wonderful things kind of recycled in the materials and mix-ups of what they do.
But you know, it's really interesting. Even like, you know, your packs of paper that you use to print at home. So you buy recycled paper, which is slightly more expensive and it's unbleached and it's got a rougher texture, to your white paper, which has kind of got that blue tinge to it, like photocopy paper. And it's much shinier and it's much thinner. And it's hard. I mean, it's fine to photocopy. It's much harder to cut because it's like it's got a coating on it.
Yeah.
Strange.
There's a question for Caroline as well. There's a couple actually. There's one from Lisa about the Gaelic language and the culture and that inspiration for your works. That's sort of slightly different to talking about materials, Caroline. And then back to the materials a bit question from Joan about whether you know the work of Angus McPhee and whether that's someone who you are influenced by or not.
Yeah, so Angus's work years and years ago, and actually quite a long time ago, I did a couple of workshops at Tykesfe when the exhibition of his work was on, and that was really special because we were in with his work all day long and then talking about his work and things. So Tykesfe is in North Uist and he was from South Uist. And I also knew Joyce, and she had an exhibition which was celebrating or kind of honoring his work. And I made I made a large pair of slippers for him because I felt it was time he could put his feet up. And it was really lovely because she looked at them and smiled and said, "Oh, Angus would have loved those." So I just felt that was quite nice. So because I feel he had quite a tough life, and that whole thing of not speaking, but he did speak if you spoke Gaelic and he knew who you were. So there was sort of lots going on. Yeah. So yeah, and I found his work very moving, and I think he did have this thing of the compulsion, and it was old skills that he knew from when he was young, and it was a grounding thing. And then when they in Craigdonane, when they learnt, they just let him get on and make those things, and the gardeners would burn them every year. But then Joyce rescued a few, and that's what's now in the I think she got them into a collection in Glasgow or Aberdeen, I'm not sure, but she spent years trying to get them accepted. But because it's seen as plant material and really fragile, none of these archive places wanted to take them. So in reference to Lisa's question, so I did learn Gaelic when we moved to Skye quite a while ago. I'm not very good, but I've got a bit of an understanding. And so lots of the Gaelic words might relate to a particular technique or something. So having a bit of that knowledge and then some of the plant names and things The Hunterian. Okay, thanks, Lisa. So that's really good. Yeah, so I've forgotten what I was saying now.
We're talking about the Gallic influences.
Yeah, so basically because it's quite a poor habitat around here, and it's just learning how you can use these materials, and how people, yeah, they did rely on all these plant materials for all sorts of different things. And because it's history, like Skye has had tourists for a long time, those traditions have gone from Skye sooner than other places. Um, so yeah, so I've just been trying to kind of gather up any of that knowledge, and yeah.
And have you found it's quite just when you're talking about the other artists, I'd never come across them because it's not my niche of kind of research area. Do you find that the community of people that work in a similar way to you, historically or currently, is it like quite a large community? Is it small? Is it very kind of supportive as well? I'm just, yeah, generally interested.
I don't really, I don't know. I just kind of work away on my own in a way. And the people that I speak to is kind of more, it's like older people or special, to try and get some, yeah. Or for instance, in Orkney, I would travel to Orkney a few years ago, and that I got this book from Ireland all about the different materials and lots of information about stuff in Ireland because they kept quite a lot more knowledge there. They had a lot of straw and things. And but anyway, there's a museum up there, and the guy was very knowledgeable, and we were able to swap skills and swap ideas and knowledge and things. So yeah, there's always little bits. Like he was able to tell me how when he was a boy, there was a certain type of grass that grew, I think it was on the cliff top, so where the soil isn't very thick, and then the roots grow really thick, and you cut a little square of that, and then that was your cushion as a boy on a lump of stone or a piece of wood. So it's just lots, but it'd be a very specific type of grass because of the way the roots, and it wouldn't come unraveled or anything, and grew in a very specific place. So there's lots of bits of information like that. So I try and pull all these bits together, and yeah, so that I did a book called Fragments, which goes with the string exhibition, which I did, where I've kind of gathered lots of snippets like this together. Yeah.
Now, is that in a way where you're motivated to kind of share that with the next generation, or is it just like also an exploration of your, yeah, I guess your creative
No,
work?
I think it's really important to share it and
Pass it on,
pass
definitely.
it on, and
Pass it on.
to it's like keeping it alive
Yeah.
and keeping those skills alive and that knowledge, and because somebody else might have like a different connection and be
Mhm.
able to add something else.
Mhm.
Because it's, yeah, I mean, my background was training as an architect, so that I kind of look at structures and space and materials, I suppose. And then learning about specific basket techniques or weaving techniques is a kind of structure and things. So yeah.
I was going to say in Edinburgh, we're very lucky. We have a huge amount of people that are weaving in lots of different areas. And sometimes those circles kind of overlap. And it's just really interesting. I mean, I wish there was like a central way that you could bring everybody together, because there's so many people and you kind of come across each other here and there.
And is
And
that through exhibitions that are on that are maybe like kind of specific to that?
well, there's a mixture. I think now that the tapestry department isn't at ECA, that's a big loss. So there's not generations of people coming out that have learned weaving, but there's a few different tutors in Edinburgh, and I guess learners are involved in they kind of straddle across different people, and I think you just have to rely on it filtering out. but definitely when groups come together, there's a lot of, like you said, Caroline, there's a lot of sharing of knowledge. And I
Mm,
think that's so important. And it doesn't matter if you've got 3 months worth of knowledge or you've got 30 years worth of knowledge, all of it's valid and all of it's important.
mm,
And I think anybody that holds on to their knowledge and doesn't pass it on, I think they're doing a huge disservice to the rest of society, because they'll take that knowledge with them and it will never go. And it's the interaction and the education between people that I think is super important.
mm.
I
And,
think
and this thing of skills, hand skills.
Yeah, skills. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's that mixture of the hand skill and there's more than that. It's like the culture and but that's something else in your head going on as well.
But you need to do that within a group setting, I think, rather
Yeah.
than reading about it. You know, you can read about it, but you're still in your own little bubble. I think it's the shared experience that's super
That
important.
it comes alive, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
is there
Like,
like a Weavers Guild or anything like that? I'm just thinking about sort of like the sector and what, like
so there's different, yeah, there is.
I wonder
There
if they
is.
do anything,
There's
where
lots of
young
different
people have,
guilds
yeah,
that you can join. They're all quite separate though.
right, okay. I feel like maybe like one in Scotland. I don't know. I'll do some research. I'm like, ooh, where can we pull these things together? And just when you're talking about, the longevity and the passing of skills, I don't know if you've come across Make Learn, which is part of the Make Manifesto, that was kind of devised with kind of industry, the sector's industry experts to see where or what we can do with craft, to kind of push it into kind of school and early education and things like that. So they have, but yeah, I think they're looking to build on resources and things too. So it might be, my head's just buzzing going, oh, what can we do to kind of,
There's
preserve
your job,
these
Steph.
and pass these things? I have enough
There's your
jobs.
mission.
My next mission.
Well,
Yeah.
in fact, being part of this exhibition is almost a little bit of that in a way. Because I missed the opening and missed meeting the other people. It's really nice to meet Joe and have this conversation. And yeah,
You couldn't have done that at the opening. It was so busy.
right. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
connection. Or maybe we need to keep going with the Hagchats, Kate. Excellent. So I'm just watching the time. We've only got, that's a whole hour, just went by really quickly. I'm just wondering if anyone has any last questions before we have to finish up. I mean, I could stay on and chat more material, but it's such a glorious evening, like thanks for coming along and sitting with us. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Steph, for leading that conversation. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Caroline, for being part of it and for just being able to share your thoughts and ideas together. And I'm really glad we've made all the different connections between all the artists in Hag. I hope that is a further network that everyone's now developed from out of their particular field and into other areas of work. I'm really pleased that that's been an effect of this exhibition. Please come along to see the show. It's on until the 8th of June. Tell people not to miss it. There's always these people who are like, oh, I was going to go and see that. Tell them they've only got like 3 weeks left. Yeah, very much looking forward to seeing more people there, seeing more people at our other events. Click on the online exhibition, buy the catalogue, and we'll see you at the next project. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Just quickly, Sean said he got the timing wrong and he wants to see the recording, and that will get added to the Hag online exhibition, which you can find through our website as
Do you
well.
want to just say a little bit about that, Kate?
Yeah, very quickly, just to give I did share a link with it in the chat so people can look over it. But you can also find it from our website. I can do it very quickly. Let me just do that before people disappear. I'll just very quickly from this. This is our website. Share that. this is on the homepage of our website, and if you click here on online program, you get through to all of our online exhibitions and archives of other exhibitions. And here it's the top one at the moment because it's just new. This is the whole online exhibition. We've got a virtual tour. We've got different artists, all the details, some beautiful photography that's commissioned for the show. If you want larger print or accessible reader guides, we've got those as well. There's all the live events recordings are down here in the bottom right. What we've currently got up, we've put subtitles on them. We'll put subtitles on this as well. And then, yeah, that's the digital version of the catalogue is there, or you can buy it direct from the shop. So that's the online exhibition. Yeah, it's a little treasure trove in an archive that will stay online forever. So yeah, have a chance to look at that.
Excellent.
There
So that's
we go.
the link at the top of the chat.
Yeah.
I've just reshared the link as well, Caroline.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
the
so
last-
everyone can spend some time with it. There's a few pages that aren't quite finished, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Keep checking.
Yeah, that-
Mainly the online tour of the show, the virtual walk around, but that will be there soon.
No, that's
And
good.
thanks to Caroline and Joe for being so generous and
Definitely.
honest with your answers to your questions. So
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks everybody. Have a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of the sunshine.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very
See you
much.
all again.
Bye.
Bye.